Grow these 29 perennial crops for endless harvests. And I'm about to show you how to create a food system that feeds your family for decades with almost zero work after the first year. Most people think gardening means planting, harvesting, and replanting every single season. They're trapped in an endless cycle of work, expense, and uncertainty. But what if I told you there's a completely different way? These 29 perennial crops will change everything you think you know about growing food. Plant them once, harvest for 20 years, 30 years, even 50 years. No replanting, no reseeding, no starting over every spring. But here's what's really shocking. Most of these crops produce more food per square foot than any annual vegetable you've ever grown. And they get better with age, not worse. I discovered this secret after visiting a 40-year-old food forest that still feeds a family of 6 with almost no maintenance. The owner planted it once in the 1980s and has been harvesting fresh food every month since then. While your neighbors are spending hundreds of dollars every year on seeds, plants, and garden supplies, you'll be harvesting pounds of food from plants that practically take care of themselves. But here's the catch. Most of these crops take 2 to 3 years to establish. Start too late, and you'll be waiting years for your first real harvest. So here's the question every smart gardener needs to ask. Why would you plant annuals when you could plant once and eat forever? Long before perennial crops became a buzzword in gardening circles, 2 visionaries were already planting the seeds of a food revolution in their own backyards. In 1953, J. Russell Smith set out to prove that nut trees could do more than shade a lawn. They could feed a family, heal the land, and outlast any annual garden. His farm became a living laboratory where chestnuts, persimmons, and mulberries thrived side by side for decades. Smith didn't just publish ideas. He let his trees speak for themselves, year after year, through blizzards, droughts, and the slow march of time. A few hundred miles away in Pennsylvania, John Hershey was quietly building a nursery that would outlive him. He collected and grafted edible trees, some of which are still bearing fruit more than half a century later, living proof that a single planting could feed generations. Hershey's nut tree nursery became a local legend, drawing neighbors and skeptics alike to see apples, pawpaws, and hickories dropping harvest after harvest with barely a shovel lifted. These early experiments weren't funded by big grants or government programs. They were fueled by stubborn curiosity and a belief that food shouldn't have to be a season-by-season gamble. Smith and Hershey's orchards offered a glimpse of a different future, one where planting once could mean eating for a lifetime. Their work laid the roots for today's perennial food movement, showing that lasting abundance can start with a single bold decision in an ordinary backyard. By the mid-1970s, the idea of perennial food wasn't just a backyard experiment. It was about to get a scientific address. In 1976, Wes Jackson, a former college professor with Kansas prairie roots, founded the Land Institute. He wasn't content with small trials or scattered orchards. Jackson wanted to transform agriculture itself. He looked at the endless plowing and replanting of annual grains and saw a system that wore out both people and the land. Instead, he pictured fields that could stay green and productive for decades, fields built on the deep roots of perennial crops. Jackson's approach was bold. Take the lessons from those early food forests and run with them in a research setting, using data to back up every claim. The Land Institute gathered scientists, breeders, and old USDA germplasm, some of it collected as far back as the 1930s, and set to work on a new kind of grain. That work led to Kernza, a perennial wheatgrass that became the first real test of Jackson's vision. Kernza's timeline began in those Kansas fields, but its influence spread much further. By 2011, the perennial grain movement had gone from outsider dream to national conversation. In his State of the Union address, President Obama called out perennial agriculture as a big idea for the future, turning the spotlight on the kind of research Jackson had championed for decades. The USDA took note, and perennial grains started appearing in policy documents and extension bulletins. What started as a stubborn hope in one man's mind became a research agenda, one that promised to measure, prove, and deliver the long-term abundance that backyard pioneers had only hinted at. With the Land Institute's launch, the era of data-driven perennial food systems had truly begun. A single planting of perennial crops does more than promise food for years. It transforms the very ground beneath your feet. Unlike annual vegetables, which live fast and die young, perennials send roots deep into the earth, sometimes reaching 2 meters or more. These roots work year after year, weaving through the soil, pulling in carbon from the air, and locking it away underground. Scientific studies now confirm what early pioneers suspected. Mature perennial systems can sequester between 0.5 ton and 1 ton of carbon per hectare every single year. That's double, sometimes triple, the rate of most annual gardens. The secret lies beneath the surface. Deep roots break up compacted layers, create channels for water, and build stable soil structure that resists erosion. Instead of bare patches left after harvest, perennial beds stay covered, holding the soil in place through storms and droughts. Over time, organic matter builds up, feeding a web of life. Earthworms, fungi, and microbes that turn dirt into living, breathing soil. The result? Land that grows richer, not poorer, with each passing season. This isn't just about carbon numbers or soil tests. It's about resilience. When the climate throws a curveball, whether it's a scorching summer or a sudden downpour, fields anchored by perennial roots hold their ground. They keep absorbing water, keep feeding pollinators, and keep producing food when annual crops might fail. The USDA and Land Institute now track these changes, measuring real gains in soil carbon and structure after just a decade of perennial planting. For gardeners and small farmers, the message is clear. Every year you wait is a year lost to building this silent foundation. The sooner those roots go in, the sooner the soil begins its quiet work, turning a patch of earth into a climate buffer, a carbon bank, and a harvest that only gets better with age. Every gardener knows the spring routine: dig, sow, water, weed, repeat. The promise of fresh tomatoes or lettuce comes with a price. Weekends spent hunched over garden beds, hoses running, seed packets piling up year after year. Perennial crops rewrite that script. After the first 2 or 3 years of getting established, these plants settle in for the long haul, quietly putting down roots and delivering food with a fraction of the effort. Measured across dozens of trials, the numbers are striking. Once mature, a perennial food bed demands just 0.02 hours of labor per square foot each year. That's about 10 minutes of work for a 5x5 patch, less time than it takes to find your gloves. Compare that to the constant hustle of annual plantings, which soak up 3 times more labor just to keep the weeds and pests at bay. Water is another story entirely. Deep-rooted perennials tap into moisture far below the surface, riding out dry spells that would wilt most annuals. Studies show that established perennial systems use up to 30% less irrigation than their annual counterparts. Where annual beds can turn patchy and brown after a week without rain, perennial crops stay green and productive, even when the hose stays coiled. The real surprise comes with the calendar. Many of these plants, nut trees, berry bushes, perennial vegetables, keep producing for 15, 20, even 30 years. That means fewer trips to the nursery, fewer bags of fertilizer, and more weekends reclaimed for anything but garden chores. For anyone tired of the seasonal grind, the message is simple: plant once and let the harvests roll in for decades. The sooner those roots go in, the sooner the work starts to shrink, and the more time you get back, year after year. Asparagus is the perennial that wins over even the most skeptical gardener. Plant a crown once, and for the next 15 years, you'll watch it push up fresh green spears every spring, often weeks before any other vegetable dares to break the soil. The first shoots arrive when the air is still crisp, a living promise that the long winter is finally over. In practical terms, an established asparagus bed delivers about 0.028 pounds of harvest per square foot each year. That's not a one-time windfall, but a steady dividend that keeps coming, season after season, with almost no extra work. The real test is patience. Asparagus crowns need 2 to 3 years to settle in before you can start cutting. But after that, the payoff is almost effortless. No digging, no replanting, no annual rush to buy seeds or prep beds. Just a short window of weeding and mulching in early spring, and the rest is up to the plant. The result is a crop that not only outlasts most annual vegetables, but also transforms the start of every gardening year. For anyone who is tired of starting from scratch, asparagus offers a taste of what perennial abundance really means. Kernza is the perennial grain that's rewriting the rules of what a staple crop can do. Bred from intermediate wheatgrass and finally reaching the market in 2015, Kernza stands out for more than just its deep roots. It's changing how grain fields survive hardship. In the brutal drought of 2012, Kansas wheat fields shriveled, losing nearly half their yield. But Kernza plots, growing side by side, saw only a 12% drop. That difference isn't just a number on a chart, it's the difference between a harvest and bare ground. Kernza's roots run up to 2 meters deep, tapping moisture that annual wheat never reaches and holding the soil in place when everything else dries out. Dr. Sherry Flint Garcia, a leading researcher in perennial grain breeding, put it plainly. Kernza demonstrates 30% higher total water use efficiency compared with annual wheat under comparable rainfall, and its root system can reach 2 meters deep, contributing to both drought resilience and deep carbon storage. After a 2 to 3 year establishment period, a Kernza stand can yield about 0.05 pounds of grain per square foot each year, year after year, with no need for replanting. That's not just a side project for hobbyists. It's the first real proof that perennial crops can step into the shoes of annual staples, offering both resilience and real food security. Kernza's leap from research fields to bakery shelves signals something bigger, a future where planting once can mean feeding families for a decade or more, even when the weather turns against you. Rhubarb is the kind of perennial that sneaks up on you. While most gardens are still shaking off the last frost, thick red stalks push through the cold ground, ready for harvest weeks before summer even arrives. For anyone who's tired of waiting for the first berries or tomatoes, rhubarb offers a head start. A tart, juicy promise that dessert season is officially open. The stems are the main event, famous for pies and crumbles. But there's a twist. The leaves are toxic. That built-in warning label only adds to the plant's mystique. Every spring, gardeners across the northern states cut bundles of stalks and leave the lush green leaves behind, a ritual that's both practical and a little dramatic. Victoria rhubarb, with its thick, tender stems, has become a favorite from Maine to Montana. It shrugs off harsh winters and comes back stronger every year, thriving in places where tender annuals would never survive. Once planted, a rhubarb crown can keep producing for a decade or more with almost no effort. Just a little compost and an open patch of soil. It's the perennial that turns a forgotten corner of the yard into a reliable, early-season harvest. For anyone looking to add a bit of surprise and color to their spring, rhubarb is proof that perennial crops aren't just about calories, they're about delight too. James Wilson still remembers the winter of 1982, when hope and heartbreak arrived in the same season. He and his family had spent months digging holes along the hillside, tucking in young hazelnut saplings and berry canes, picturing a food forest that would feed them for decades. The work was backbreaking, Every root ball planted was a promise to the future, not a guarantee. That first year, a late frost swept down from the Cascades, biting through the orchard. By dawn, half the new hazelnuts stood blackened and limp, their leaves curled in defeat. Years of planning and weeks of labor gone in a single night. Most people would have walked away. James didn't. He spent the next spring poring over extension bulletins and nursery catalogs, hunting for hardier varieties that could survive Oregon's unpredictable cold. The family replanted, this time with hazelnuts bred to shrug off deep freezes. Each sapling went into the ground with a lesson attached. Resilience takes patience, and abundance demands a long view. For the Wilsons, those early setbacks turned into a kind of quiet ritual, reading the land, learning its moods, and accepting that real harvests don't come overnight. The food forest grew slowly, shaped as much by loss as by luck. Every year brought new surprises, a bumper crop of berries one summer, a lean year for chestnuts the next. But through droughts and storms, the roots kept reaching deeper, and the family's commitment never wavered. The waiting was hard, but the promise of a self-sustaining harvest, one that could outlast any single season, was worth every setback. The Wilson family's food forest stands as living proof that patience pays dividends year after year. Their 4-acre hillside planted in 1982 now delivers 2 metric tons of fresh nuts, berries, and perennial vegetables each season, a harvest that dwarfs the output of most annual gardens and keeps coming without the endless cycle of digging, sowing, and replanting. But the story goes deeper than baskets of food. Over 4 decades, the Wilsons cut their fertilizer use by 70%. Nitrogen-fixing shrubs and deep-rooted trees now pull nutrients from the subsoil and return them to the surface, turning what was once a yearly expense into a memory. The ground beneath their boots has changed too. Lab tests show a 35% rise in soil organic carbon since the first sapling went in. That's not just richer soil. It's carbon pulled from the atmosphere and locked away, year after year, by roots that never rest. The transformation doesn't stop at the soil line. Where a bare field once buzzed with a handful of bees, the Wilsons now count a 2.5-fold jump in pollinator visits. Native bumblebees, orchard mason bees, butterflies, drawn in by the steady bloom of perennial flowers, have turned the orchard into a haven of life. James Wilson sums up what decades of data can't quite capture. You plant for yourself, but you harvest for your grandchildren. Every year, the work shrinks and the rewards grow. For anyone still on the fence, the numbers are clear. A single planting can yield for decades, cut costs to the bone, rebuild the soil, and turn a patch of earth into a magnet for life. The real risk isn't in waiting for the trees to grow, it's in waiting to start. Every season spent replanting is a season lost to exhaustion and uncertainty. Perennial crops flip that script, turning effort into security, and patience into abundance that deepens each year. With food prices rising and climate shocks accelerating, the smartest harvests start now, long before you need them. The real question, will you still be replanting or reaping what you dared to plant once? Let me know your thoughts below.